In the world of roller coasters, there are a few roller coasters that defy explanation. Crazy designs, crazier theming, the lost and abandoned, and the disastrous failures. They are often the forgotten of the amusement industry. These are their stories. In the year 1851, Prince Albert and members of his Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce organised a large-scale event. Arguably in response to a highly successful industrial exhibition held in France in 1844, the event would run in London's Hyde Park from May until October, known as the Great Exhibition. Designed to showcase Britain's position as an industrial leader in the world, this was the first in a series of what is today known as the World's Fair. Containing over 13,000 exhibits from Britain and all of its then colonies and dependencies, as well as 44 other countries, the Great Exhibition was a tremendous showcase of modern industrial and technological development, with its acres upon acres of exhibitions centred around the famous Crystal Palace. The success of the Great Exhibition in London would spark the World's Fair to life as a regular tradition, being shared around the cities of the world to continually celebrate invention and design. As the host nation, countries around the world would have an opportunity to demonstrate their own contribution to the development of technology, and the World's Expo would become a coveted opportunity to attract tourists, investment, and the attention of the world, and to establish a reputation as a modern, technological nation. It would be 119 years later that London's Great Exhibition would directly inspire another installment of the World's Expo on the other side of the globe, from another country keen to prove their innovation and rapid technological growth, and one that would leave a lasting, profound impact on the amusement industry forever. Our story begins with Expo 1970. The year is 1970, and the World's Expo is set to be held in Suita City in Osaka, Japan. This will be the first Expo to be held in Asia, and it is a massive opportunity for Japan. Osaka was chosen as the host city in 1965, 20 years after the conclusion of World War II. Since the defeat of the Axis powers, the atomic bombings, and American occupation, Japan had undergone a post-war economic miracle, thanks to huge commercialization, and at the heart of their economic success was the technology industry. An expo on Japanese soil presented a huge opportunity for this new age Japan to demonstrate how far it had come in the space of a couple of decades. The expo organizers hired no less than 12 architects to design the expo space in Suita City, under the very appropriate theme, progress and harmony. The designers of the Expo wanted Japan's first attempt at hosting the event to leave a lasting impression. They saw their World's Fair as less of an exposition and more of a festival, celebrating technological development and Japanese culture while placing a heavier emphasis on spaces where regular people could meet and socialize while visiting the event. Drawing inspiration from London's original 1851 Expo, the architects designed a central space under a unified roof, known as the Symbol Zone, with different areas and exhibitions branching out from the Symbol Zone like the branches of a tree. The Symbol Zone would be the unifying central area of the event, and it would include attractions targeted at the more social aspect of the expo. Just outside the Symbol Zone, the organisers opted to include a large amusement zone, occupying land just to the south of their new iconic Tower of the Sun. This amusement zone would be essentially a full-scale theme park in its own right, with more than 40 rides and attractions and 19 restaurants and shops. When the expo opened on March 15, 1970, it was home to 2 roller coasters, both of which were revolutionary designs from Japanese manufacturer Sansi Technologies, and neither of which have ever been replicated again. With Japan's technological development and industrial growth, it's probably unsurprising that a number of Japanese ride and roller coaster manufacturers came to the fore in the post-war period. One of those was Sansi Technologies. Founded in 1951, Sansi initially manufactured stage equipment and elevators, expanding through its subsidiaries to begin the manufacture of amusement rides, its first being the wave coaster at Takarazuka Garden Fields in 1952. While many of Sansi's early coasters would follow the trends of the industry in Japan at the time, including jungle mice and jet coasters, Sansi showed an early desire to set themselves apart from other Japanese manufacturers, taking on the challenge of replicating Disney's Matterhorn bobsleds when they constructed the Bobsleigh coaster at Nara Dreamland in 1961, and claiming the world record for the longest roller coaster with Fuji-Q Highland's Giant Coaster in 1966, standing with over 1.4 kilometers of track. During development for Expo 1970, Sansi were contracted to construct 2 roller coasters for the Expo's amusement zone, and they would use their opportunity during the International Showcase of Innovation to show off 2 roller coaster designs that were unlike anything they had attempted before. The first, and less documented of the 2, was known as the Rotary Jungle Mouse. According to RCDB, the Rotary Jungle Mouse was extremely unique in that the entire roller coaster rotated on a turntable around a stationary lift hill, working like an inside-out spiral lift hill. While very little footage exists, we can see from this archival footage that the entire layout of the coaster revolved on a tilted turntable, somewhat like a spinning top. In the center was a spiral lift, with cars being brought up to the top of the lift by the rotation of the track around it rather than the spinning egg beater in the center. It's difficult to imagine what a maintenance headache this coaster might have been, but the answer may lie in the coaster's fate, which, unlike its sibling, is completely unknown. The Rotary Jungle Mouse did not operate beyond the end of the Expo. It is thought that the coaster may have been relocated to Nara Dreamland, where it potentially operated with the revolving feature reversed to become simply a retrofitted standard spiral lift hill. But believe it or not, the Rotary Jungle Mouse was actually the least ambitious of Sansei's opening day projects for the 1970 Expo. For Sansei's second project at the 1970 Expo, the manufacturer wanted to go big. They had already broken the track length record at Fuji-Q Highland, and they had their eyes on a project that would break even more records and become a renowned roller coaster around the world. Their larger project would be known as Daidarasaurus. When Daidarasaurus opened with the Expo in March 1970, it featured 5 tracks. The 5 coasters would ascend their lift hills in tandem before going off in separate directions. The first of the 5 tracks was a smaller coaster designed for families. Alongside it were a pair of racing coasters that followed an identical layout side by side, and beside them, the largest of the 5, a pair of dueling coasters. At the time, dueling coasters had rarely been attempted, and racing coasters were always limited to just 2 tracks. Daidarasaurus smashed records by opening with not only 5 tracks, but 3 separate possible ride experiences. With the taller coasters standing almost 30 meters tall and hitting a top speed of 72.5 kilometers an hour, these were the coasters that would be the headliners of Expo 1970. Running from March 15th to September 13th, Expo 1970 was a huge success. From the display of moon rocks to the premiere of the first ever IMAX film, the Expo left a legacy that is still celebrated in Osaka and in Japan as a whole today. Visitors also poured into the Expo's amusement zone, getting to experience Sansei's revolutionary roller coasters. The success was so notable that after the closure of the Expo itself, it was determined that the amusement zone would continue in operation as an amusement park in its own right. The 5 tracks of Daidarasaurus would operate for more than 25 years, until the park sought to downsize the attraction in 1999. 3 of the tracks were demolished, while the 2 largest dueling tracks were combined to form one long Mobius loop coaster. In doing so, Daidarasaurus became the new world record holder for the longest roller coaster in the world, a record it would hold until the opening of Steel Dragon 2000 at the turn of the millennium. The park was handed over to private operators under the name of Expoland, and it would operate successfully for the next 30 years. However, it would be Expoland and the negligence of their operators that would change the amusement park industry in Japan and beyond forever. Expoland would continue to be a successful amusement park through the late 20th century. In 1979, they added an arrow corkscrew named Space Salamander. In 1996, their biggest investment ever was a B&M inverted coaster by the name of Orochi. This was a near clone of Raptor at Cedar Point. The park was operating as one of the most popular in Osaka and possibly in Japan as a whole. But the coaster that predicated the downfall of the 1970 Expo Park was the successor to another Japanese coaster from yet another exposition years before. At the International Flower and Green Exposition of 1990, also in Osaka, Japanese manufacturer Togo had constructed the stand-up coaster Fujin Raijin. This coaster would feature dueling tracks of 680 meters in length and would become a massive success for the company. When the Flower and Green Exposition closed in late 1990, the coaster was relocated to Greenland in Kumamoto, reopening there as Fujin Raijin. In 1992, Expoland contracted Togo to construct a follow-up to the successful stand-up coaster. Standing 40 meters tall with 1,050 meters of track, Fujin Raijin 2 opened to the public on March 20th, 1992. Perhaps rather ominously, it would be the last stand-up coaster that Togo would ever construct. To understand why Expoland and Fujin Raijin 2 failed and how significant their failure was, we need to understand the state of the Japanese amusement park industry at the time. After decades of reclusiveness and closed borders, as well as hostilities towards the Western world, Japan's amusement industry had exploded between the 1950s and the 1990s. Amusement parks opened up all over the country, sparking investment into new parks from both local investors and foreign companies like Disney. The tourism industry and the number of amusement parks had grown so fast that regulations had not yet been implemented in order to keep up. Dozens of amusement parks were now in operation around the country, with little safety regulations governing how the parks must maintain their rides and attractions. This was a fact that the operators of Expoland were keen to take advantage of. Japanese regulation at the time only required roller coaster trains to be thoroughly inspected once per year, usually using advanced methods to ensure the structural integrity of trains. However, there were no overseeing bodies ensuring that parks were using these methods. Instead, Expoland inspected their coaster trains annually, but only using a visual inspection. This visual inspection would not be enough to notice a critical design flaw in Togo's stand-up trains. During the design phase, Togo had made adjustments to the axles and wheel assemblies in order to mitigate the risk of valleying due to slight differences in the track gauge that could become too tight for the wheel assemblies. To prevent this, Togo adjusted the wheel assemblies to provide a few millimeters of space between the upstop wheel and the track at all times, so that these slight gauge variations would not affect the speed. The byproduct of this was that the train would often jolt up and down or side to side at various points during the layout, and this put additional stress on the bolt holding the axle in place on each of the cars, which Togo had not accounted for in the design stage. Expoland's visual inspections would not have noticed the early signs of fatigue on these bolts. On May 5th, 2007, as one of the trains on Fujin Raijin 2 approached one of the more forceful sections of the layout, an axle gave way, causing one of the cars to derail. The car fell to the side, coming into contact with the railing of a catwalk alongside the track. A 19-year-old woman was killed when her head came into contact with this railing, and a further 19 guests were injured, with many onlookers also being taken to hospital to be treated for shock and illness after witnessing the accident. Investigations found that Expoland's negligence and failure to maintain the ride had been responsible for the accident. Their officers would be raided, and they would be cited by authorities for faulty maintenance. When the park attempted a reopening without their Togo stand-up coaster, the loss of trust in the park resulted in plummeting attendances, and the park's final closure would come on December 9th, 2007. The legacy of the accident on Fujin Raijin 2 has made a lasting impact on the Japanese amusement industry. In response to the revelations of Expoland's negligence, a string of laws were introduced to oversee the maintenance and operation of amusement rides in Japan. This had been the first fatal accident on a Japanese roller coaster, and attendances at amusement parks around the entire country took a massive hit. As attendances dropped, with the Japanese public becoming cynical towards the safety of amusement parks in general, and smaller amusement parks struggled to meet the expenses of the newly legislated maintenance requirements, dozens of small parks would shut their gates over the following years, with their financial woes all linked directly back to the tragedy at Expoland. These struggles for small Japanese parks continue today, as the profitability of operating an amusement park in Japan is no longer viable for most operators, aside from the parks with huge financial backing such as Disney and Universal. Today, Expoland's site has been transformed into the Expo City Shopping Center, still a part of the Expo Commemorative Park. But its legacy and the impact it left on Japan's amusement industry is completely irreversible, not least because the park's negligence cost a young woman her life. Yoshino Kogawara, 19 years old, was a university student from Higashiomi in Shiga Prefecture. Her life was tragically taken on that day in 2007. May she rest in peace, and I extend my thoughts and utmost respect to her family and loved ones for whom the damage done by this tragic and avoidable accident can never be undone. And so ends the story of a park that is one of the great curiosities of the roller coaster world. Once home to the world's only revolving jungle mouse, a dueling coaster with 5 tracks, and a B&M Raptor clone, its story ended in needless heartbreak caused by nothing other than negligence and a lack of care for the lives of riders and guests. Thank you for watching this roller coaster investigation. Join me next time as I continue to tell the stories of some of the strangest and most unique roller coasters ever constructed. In the meantime, please click the like button to help out against the YouTube algorithm, and click the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when I next upload. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the unique coasters of Expoland, and I'll see you in the next video.